Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. Welcome, Emma. Welcome, Georgie. Go ahead and give us like an audio test. And guys in the chat, please let us know the levels because it's the first time we're having 3 people on. So it should be an experience. But how are you, Emma?
I'm really well. Thanks, Danny.
Georgie, how are you? Back fresh from Bulgaria?
Yep. Crazy and jet lagged as usual.
Thank you guys so much. Sincerely appreciate it. Let me switch the screen here. If you're new, consider subscribing. We do live streams every other week at 6 p.m. PST. All super chats are donated to Mr. Raymond PhD. And as you can see here, we have accumulated a pretty good amount of money for him, $455.82 over 3 months, basically. And those are all super chat. Oh, no, I'm getting an echo. Is the echo super bad? Is it just on my end?
That's what I'm hearing.
I can't hear it.
That's not good. I moved my speakers away. Sorry, guys. Growing pains. Hopefully, it's a little bit better now. I'll watch. Oh, it seems better now. Danny is fine. Okay, gave me a heart attack. Okay, we raised $455.82 for Mr. Raymond Pete. Thank you guys so much. You guys are all part of that, contributing to the super chats. So thank you guys. So let's go through Emma Sgourakis. Thank you so much for joining us. Emma has a fantastic Instagram, so go subscribe or follow Emma on Instagram. She does coaching, although she is so excellent. Her spots are usually filled up, and you can find her on her website, thenutritioncoach.com.au. Georgie is now on Twitter, so you can follow him at twitter.com/hateit. And he links to his website, hateit.me, which we're going to be reading off a lot of articles from. Then I do coaching, and I just built this new webpage. If you go to dannyroddy.com/linktree, people have told me they don't know that I do this, so that's why I'm mentioning it. And then, of course, idealabsdc.com, Georgie's company, which he does boutique supplements. And speaking of supplements, we are going to announce the winners of last month's show. And so Truth Seeker, and they say Georgie is bathing in red light like your last time, Georgie. Amanda Daisy Lowry, Wilt Chamberlain, and Deborah Kraus. And so you guys are the winners. You guys need to email me at danny@dannyroddy.com. And then and you need to let me know what supplement you want on idealabsdc.com. And then I can send your info to Georgie and he can send those out to you guys. But yeah, how are you guys? Georgie, you said you had some news for us?
Yeah, I was in Bulgaria over the last 2 weeks, mostly, for family-related stuff. My son was with my parents, his grandparents, there for about 3 months, but I used the opportunity while there to reintroduce myself and make connections with some renowned biochemists and biophysicists at the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. And one thing led to another, and I've been telling you over the last year or so that I wanted to start doing my own studies, right? I mean, reading other people's work is one thing, experimenting yourself is another, but if you really want to test in a statistically significant manner and kind of prove your ideas, the best way is to do in vivo studies. Mm-hmm. So I managed to find people there willing to do both in vitro and in vivo studies, and the first in vivo study is already underway. So it will be testing our product Cortisol, which is a combination of progesterone and DHEA for stopping a highly aggressive form of cancer on hamsters. So for now, the animal models will be hamsters, rats, and mice, but there is an opportunity, if this thing develops well, to eventually switch over to monkeys. And this is something that I never thought would be possible because these are such expensive studies. I tried to contract with labs out in China, Vietnam, Thailand, and none of this really came through, but I guess I managed to strike gold in Bulgaria, so we'll see how it goes. But the first study is already underway. You'll be testing a highly aggressive bone marrow cancer in hamsters, and we'll be testing Cortisol. So keeping fingers crossed. Let's hope this leads to more fruitful studies. And it's not so much, actually, it's not at all about advertising the products. It's more about testing the metabolic ideas, especially on lethal conditions like cancer. They also have very good models for Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, actually multiple autoimmune conditions. There's some very good animal models we can test on. So, finally I'll be able to say that I have proven or at least corroborated some of Ray's work with my own studies.
That's amazing. Is there an ETA?
ETA, basically the raw data should be available by the end of November of this year. And then these scientists will publish that study in multiple journals. Some of them are American. Unbeknownst to me, I guess the major journals that in biochemistry, they have an editorial board, right? I mean, I knew they had an editorial board, but I didn't expect that the people that I met with in Bulgaria actually on the editorial board of the journal Nature, of the journal Cell, basically of the journal of the American Journal of Biochemistry, American Journal of Endocrinology. So we'll see what journals accept the study, but they're confident that they will be able to publish in at least 2 or 3 different journals with me as a co-author. So I'll be the last name on the list. Well, there'll be others before me.
If you want to do tests on humanoids, you can test Emma and I. We could be.
Oh, we already did that, right? We've already been studying it for several years.
I'm working backwards a little bit here, but Emma, do you want to maybe introduce yourself a little bit for somebody who isn't aware of you? I think of you as like an OG Ray Peat person. So we talked a little bit before, but I think in 2000, I think I've heard about Ray in late 2010. Starting getting into him in 2011, 12. But I feel like there was like a small handful of people that were really into him. Rob Turner being one of those people. And then you. And I remember going to your website and really liking it and thinking that you had some like artistic element to how you were doing things. And also your Instagram clearly shows that as well. But I don't think we really talked till much later. But I felt like you were like fast friends just of how much stuff we had in common.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we must have come across his work similar time, I think, to probably 2010. Yeah, but I'd been there, done that with so many dietary experiments too, like the both of you. And I was just at my wit's end. I'd just gotten to a point where everything that had been recommended, since I came out of university and was told, this is what's healthy, this is what you recommend, this is how you work with people, go out there, prescribe the fish oil and get them to, keep their diets vegetable-centric, and it's still kind of the standard model, I suppose. And for me, myself, I had to be the example of what I was going to recommend to people. So I just experimented on myself and tried every different diet there was to try and never really thrived with any of them. Yeah, I think about 2010, I Googled the question. It was to do with vegetables because I started considering, well, they really aren't that digestible. And what about the cellulose component? What about the anti-nutrients? And, not so many bioavailable nutrients. They don't seem so perfect. And I Googled the question, who defines food or who defined health food? And, of course, Ray's article popped up, one of his original, I think it was called it, Who Defines Food?
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting there reading this article and the fireworks were going off in my head and nothing had made as much sense as this of all my years of, even being there in the lectures and hearing the professors talk about, what we're meant to eat. And I sat up through the night and just kept reading. And from there on, I just started slowly applying it to myself, applying it with clients, and finally seeing clients get better just with chronic conditions or, struggling with PMS all their lives or migraines or whatever it may be. It was so exciting to actually see people getting better and feeling better. So from an early, from first reading, I started cottoning on that this guy knew his stuff. And then I tracked down Rob Turner, who was posting articles around the time, I think, one of the first I could find. He put me on to Dodie Anderson, who's become, like a sweet aunt to me, but she's highly knowledgeable on the topic as well. And she herself trained with Ray for about 20 years in person. And she speaks with him on the phone every week, and she's very connected.
So jealous.
You've got to chat with her yourself. She's just divine, but that's it. She has this, I think she has her own issues, and she has a son with health issues, and Ray helps them along, but she learns at the same time. But she's a sweetheart. And so I think just slowly building on the information, and then, coming across you, and I already reading your stuff the same. Going to have to meet Danny, and then I think from day one we could chat maybe 2-3 hours at a time.
Easily. Well, you're one of the experiences you have that Georgie and I will never have is the giving birth and kind of using those principles in that process, and with 2 kids, right?
Mm-hmm. 2 enough.
But that's an extra layer. And Georgie, you have kids as well, but seeing how the food is affecting their behavior and things, I imagine there's an extra layer that makes things more interesting that I am oblivious to, Well,
it's certainly interesting. It's, especially when you can observe it from a distance while you're going through it yourself, and seeing how the medical industry treats pregnant women too. That was a bit of an eye-opener. But just even in that point, leading up to having my first child and the pregnancy questions, I would email with Ray a lot and ask his advice on things. But when certain topics came up, first 3 months when you've got these food aversions and you should be eating the liver and you should be having a carrot salad and and you just don't want to eat anything, nothing. And asking Ray on questions like that, how might I get through this period? Or, there was a few weeks there. And when he said something like, just get more carrot salad in, and even the thought of a carrot salad just made me want to throw up. In that moment, I remember thinking, oh, that's right. He is a man. He's a genius, but he'll never experience this. So then I had to start digging, and Tom Brewer's work was pretty insightful too. But I had to start piecing a lot of it together myself in regards to the pregnancy aspect and just going through the experience personally. But and then, the progesterone element being so interesting and helpful, and seeing that help with so many female clients. But I guess even having kids and post, as a practitioner, I'm completely different. Before I ever had my own babies, I remember having a pregnant client or a new mother, and they'd talk about, oh, I just don't feel like eating this, or I'm too tired to do that. And I would be the type to say, you just got to suck it up and you just got to eat the food and get over yourself and you've got to make everything from scratch. Then I became a mother, and then I realised what sleep deprivation is really like, and the whole pregnancy exhaustion and everything. And now I hear myself saying quite the opposite. It's like, if you can get that ready-made or cut that corner or go without that, very different on how I give the advice. Haven't been through it now.
Well, isn't Ray the master of that? Like, he'll get a call on KMUD, and he'll be talking about protein and like liver detoxification or something, and the person will be like, well, I'm a vegetarian and I don't eat animal protein. He'll be like, okay, well, do you eat mushrooms? And the person will be like, oh, I hate mushrooms. And then they'll be like, okay, well, do you eat spinach or leafy greens? He's just going down the list of like next best thing. And I feel like I've definitely learned that too. Like, I don't really consider myself like a practitioner or whatever, but like just talking to people, it's like, if they don't want to do something, it's like, okay, just move on. But I used to be like, oh, well, you must not want to feel good then, yeah. And well, what I was going to ask you is, you had mentioned it already, but talking to Ray, you could see that he was hesitant to go outside his experience when you were asking questions. Was it like did you already mention it? But you were asking what should the child eat, and he just could tell you what he ate, basically.
Yeah, true. That's it. And I did an article particular to how to keep the mother fed while she's breastfeeding, because their requirements are even higher than when they're pregnant, which in our Western society, it's quite the opposite. They'll sort of say, you've had a baby, how to lose the baby belly, how to start dieting, where you should be feeding the mother more. But yeah, I started getting more questions myself about, well, what are good first foods and when to introduce them and those sort of things. And I literally couldn't find very much, legitimately helpful information out there. So I started piecing it together and put little bits of that in the article. But even with Ray, you're trying to select what might be the better foods to start with that aren't going to induce an allergy or cause an immune response or anything. And he would be like, yeah, you guys, well, I suppose I had stewed apples, and how about meat? Like pretty, but at the same time, profoundly logical. And I don't think that's where most people are at. People are making their babies all these concoctions and blending things and green juices for the child and fermented foods. And it's like, oh, yeah, what do I just boil an egg, eat some meat? How about some fruit?
I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's I forget what nationality is, but he's the raw meat advocate. His name is like Sgourakis. But he shows how like pregnant mothers that are vegan or vegetarian will be feeding their kids like this garbage, basically. So I'm not necessarily pro his lifestyle or whatever, but he does do a good job of like showing how it's these popular YouTube people are giving their kids like these really deficient, impossible to digest diets. And so, yeah, it really makes you think.
It really does. And then when you get the opportunity to observe a brand new baby, and how they evolve and what they're naturally drawn to, before they're affected by advertising and their peers or anything, what a child naturally, literally wants to reach out for is fascinating. And it usually fits with everything we talk about.
Have you noticed similar things, Georgi, of like the instinctual eating from the kids?
Oh, not only that. I mean, similar to Emma's experience when my wife was pregnant, we had a huge clash with the medical system because she tested, for the first time with both kids, she tested positive for gestational diabetes. So immediately the doctors jumped on like, oh my God, you don't know how dangerous this is. Here's your metformin. Got to start taking it regularly, come back in a week, et cetera, et cetera. My wife has something called white coat syndrome, which at this point is actually a condition. She gets really nervous around doctors. And, I challenged the doctors who gave her this test. I said, you do understand that when she's under stress, her cortisol spikes up and her blood sugar goes up, right? So one of them gave me a blank stare and said, are you an endocrinologist? The other one said, yes, I know that, but cortisol by itself will never generate such a reading. So both times we demanded that she goes back a week later and retakes the test through a different doctor, right? So someone who doesn't know her and is not as aggressive in pushing treatments, and both times the test came back negative.
Wow.
So needless to say, these two doctors now hate our guts, and and we don't go and see them anymore. But even after that, basically after the birth of both children, my wife breastfed for about 2 years, each one of them, and every time we went on on the periodic checkup for the child and the mother, the medical staff kept pressuring us to stop the breastfeeding and start either taking formula almost exclusively or at the very least feeding formula on top of the breastfeeding. And we kept saying no, 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 no. I mean, all of this generated, a lot of frustration for us. But knock on wood, both of our children are the tallest of their, in their group at the kindergarten, and neither I nor my wife are tall. I mean, I'm 5'9" and my wife is 5'7", and they're children in that group that are children of giant parents. They're two basketball player parents, like in the kindergarten where our kids, with the daycare where our kids go, and our children are taller than those. And I attribute this to not only, first of all, 2 years of breastfeeding, and since then, we let the children choose their food, and we have a number of different things. They all pro-eat more or less, but both children invariably choose sweetened milk. So to this day, on a daily basis, each one of them, and keep in mind they're still children, they drink about a quart of milk daily, and the older one probably even more. And this is an amount of milk that Ray sometimes recommends for adults. So much to the chagrin and the frustration and frankly hatred to the pediatricians, the children are in the 100. One of them is in the 108th, and the other one is in the 119th percentile height-wise. So
Can you say that? Didn't they have to set up a separate class for your son because he's so?
I don't know about that, but they did start to doubt my paternity because they said this couldn't be possible. But of course, because they did in some U.S. hospitals, they now do paternity tests by default. So there's kind of like, there's no doubt that I'm the father, and both children kind of look like me. So then the pediatrician started saying, so what are you feeding these children? We said milk. Oh no, milk is terrible. It's full of estrogen. You should switch to soy milk. And I'm like, listen, just hear us out. Look at the results. Like, shouldn't we be basing this on results? Like, why would I change something if it works so well? Well, it's not. How do you know it's always going to work? I'm like, I don't know that it's always going to work, but it has been working so far. And I'm of the opinion that if the children like it, right, and if it's working, why change it? Why experiment with something that I personally have qualms about it, and also children don't like it? I've actually tried giving them soy milk, and both of them barfed, and said no, we're not going to drink that stuff. Unfortunately, the daycare is now trying to introduce soy milk as like the default drink to give to children if they run out of water or milk from home, right? So we send them with these cartons of milk, but both of them like the milk so much they chug it within the first 2 hours at the daycare. And now the daycare has been trying to give them soy milk, and I had to intervene and say no. We live 4 blocks away. If you need more milk, call me. I'll find a way to deliver it. No soy milk. So we're kind of under a constant assault from all of these authorities around us when it comes to the children, and it's supposed to be voluntary, it's supposed to be educational, but that's not how it is presented to us. It's almost like the doctor's office. The doctor scares the bejesus out of you that you have this condition and you have to agree to everything the doctor says. But guess what? At the end, you are signing the disclaimer that you made the decision. And if it doesn't work out the way it's supposed to be, it's your fault, right? No, not your fault, but your responsibility. So that's this thing extends into all spheres of life, especially when you have children. I mean, one of the doctors, to give her credit, when I asked her why she's pushing so much for all of these formulas and soy milks and whatnot, and she basically said, look, it's right there. I have a disclaimer in the form that you signed when you came to my office. And it says that I work also as a marketing representative of Nestle and I think another company. And I said, so are you pushing these things because they're Nestle products? She said, yes. And I'm perfectly allowed to do that as long as I disclose it. And she did, right? I can't, but guess what? It's not in big letters at the beginning of the form. It's in a tiny little font at the very end where you're signing basically. And it's not worded in a way that you'll catch your attention. It kind of says that this doctor is free to represent commercial interests and may or may not have been compensated for providing advice to commercial companies, something along those lines.
That is wild. We'll try to keep this YouTube safe, but my sister jumped through many hoops to not get a certain procedure done for her children, but it ultimately failed. But when I was talking to her, I was like, I think the only solution to this is to pull your kids out of school. But that is such a huge burden, I imagine, on any parent, because like you said, you will be the onslaught of different harmful things your kids will be exposed to. It's just not going to end. And I just imagine it's that must be challenging,
Yeah, and it's if you offer to bring some, I mean that was my discussion with the daycare. I said I will bring the milk if they run out, and the answer was no. We have our own, and it's approved, and that's what we're going to be giving them. And I said no, water in this case, and they said yes, but you do understand if the children are malnourished, if they end up malnourished, you will be responsible for child neglect. I said okay, fine, I'll feed them more at home in this case, but no soy milk. It's not just the teachers. The parents are on your case too. So when we'll go to these gatherings for somebody's birthday. I have not seen a single birthday to this day of any of the children that my children go to school with. None of these birthdays, not a single one had actual milk there. Mm-hmm. If there was any milk product, it was always either soy or cashew or walnut or what are the other ones, like hazelnut, all of these nut-based products that are so popular with the paleo community.
Yeah.
And I get it. Parents want to do good things for their children, and that's fine. Every parent is free to choose that. What I find appalling and annoying is that they're actually on your case, and they gang up on you sometimes, not always, but sometimes when you pull out the regular milk. And I think the reason is because children instinctively, they probably even smell the nice natural sweetened milk that my child is drinking, and they want that too. And since they can't have it, then it annoys the parents, because that child goes and bugs their parents, says, why is Constantine drinking this nice stuff and you're feeding me this junk? And then the parents come to me and say, why do you have to sabotage everything, man?
Just let me know when you plan on bringing jugs of milk to the school, and I'll fly out to DC and we'll film it and make it a YouTube event. While we're on the topic, do you want to just touch on the idea that milk is very estrogenic or contains lots of estrogen?
I've actually sent samples from several organic brands to the lab that we use to test the purity of the supplements we produce. And not a single one of the tests found estrogen, basically, even in the range that it was supposed to be normal. Mm. So I don't know if this because we didn't send skimmel, but it was low fat. And I know most of the hormones are supposed to be stored in the fat fraction. I don't know if that's why. Next time I'll send a whole milk sample, but I highly doubt it. I think at least in the case of the brands that we're using, this is not an issue. The hormonal overload. What was an issue with one brand, which we have since stopped using, is that it found silica, and it's not listed on the label, right? And another one found carrageenan, which was also not listed on the label. And both of these are required to be listed on the label, especially for organic products. Now, the scary stuff is silica is approved as allowable additive in organic products too. So just because you're eating organic doesn't necessarily mean it's silica-free. Most of the time they'll list it on the label, but we found one brand that didn't, and it was in a fairly high amount. If you drink that whole carton of milk, you would have been exposed to quite a bit of silica, as if you ingested an entire bottle of supplements with 100 pills or something. So it wasn't a small amount.
That silica added to the milk, when Ray wrote that in his newsletter, was just so terrifying, because I'm almost tempted to ask him if there's any way to know if there's a flavor to it or something, because some of the milks here in Mexico taste pretty off, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were adulterated in some way. But that reminds me of Emma. We talked a long time ago, and I forgot what the topic was, but maybe you were asking Ray or you were asking for a client, and he was like, "Oh, can you drink more milk?" And it really spoke to his simplicity. And one of the reasons we all love him, but I just love that story. I think I talk about it all the time.
I think it was even just for myself when I had the second child and breastfeeding, as well as tending to them and trying to tend to yourself and you're not getting sleep. And I realized my calories were just not as high as I wanted them to be, but the appetite wasn't there and the time restrictions and everything. And I think I just asked him the direct question, well, how else could I get more in? He goes, couldn't you just drink more milk? And I went, yeah, I guess I could. Just walk past the fridge and...
But it's interesting how that has like a I think we've talked about it before, but there's a paper that says that milk, or maybe it's casein, has like anti-ACTH properties. And of course, ACTH increases cortisol. And I don't think, or at least I didn't think that like the milk has like supplemental qualities or something, and drinking a lot of it might have like a really good effect, so sorry, I'm getting like mild echoes from people, so let me just turn this down a little bit. If no other thoughts on that, we'll switch on to Georgi articles. Anything else, guys? No.
Not really.
Georgi, did you have any specific ones that you wanted to talk about? I have niacinamide may restore female fertility in old age.
And that I like that one because it also corroborates another study I posted not even 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago, which spoke about restoring female fertility by simply exposing the organisms to red light. And the mechanism of action was increased ATP production because red light lowers nitric oxide. And the mechanism of action in this new study was niacinamide raising NAD. And NAD and ATP are almost perfectly correlated. You can't have one being high while the other being low. So I think the two studies corroborate each other, both of them showing that fertility is, it's an energetic process, and it's not, and what we call aging really, I think this is where all the studies are essentially pointing towards, is that aging isn't natural, right? And then these processes that we see associated with aging, they're simply symptoms, just as the general aging process of an energetic dysfunction. And recovering, reversing that energetic dysfunction by any means possible, usually reverses many of the peripheral so-called effects of aging, such as infertility, cognitive decline, sexual function decline, wrinkles on the skin, and things like that. I mean, you remember the studies of methylene blue that came out recently that fully reverse skin aging. There are even creams on the market because of it, because of that effect. But all of these supplements or interventions like red light, they have one thing in common. They all restore to a degree the natural oxidative metabolism of the organism that the organism used to have when it was younger. So I guess it's more pieces of the puzzle, but they're all pointing in one direction, which to me is a strong indication that the underlying idea is correct.
Emma, is a lot of your client base fertility issues, or I'm sure that's something you've experienced, right?
Without deliberately trying to make it about that. There's the majority female, and then from that, more and more, girls in their maybe 30s who'd been, most of them, on the pill for 10, 15 years without a break. Suddenly they're married and they're like, oh, we're wanting a child, but it's just not happening. So it's definitely a big part of it. And a lot of people who'd been through several rounds of IVF and it didn't work, didn't stick, but they'd never once been asked, do you eat enough food? How's your sleep quality? How's your stress? Do you love your work? Nothing about any of that, of course. So it's, with some cases, it's literally been a matter of just getting them to get better sleep, eat more food, sometimes not even a hell of a lot better than they had been eating, just getting more fuel in general. Not doing the diets they've been doing, and then they fall pregnant.
I know
different reasons for their infertility, but that's
I know every case is different, but do you have like a way of approaching something like that? Would nutrition be the foundation that you'd really start with?
Yeah. So being a nutritionist, I have an emphasis on the food, and I think too, some people, even the people who have done their own research a bit more, or they've found Ray's work or his articles, or maybe been on the forum, got a bit lost on the forum, and they've approached me and said, I really want some ideas and maybe some guidance on how to use thyroid hormone or how to take this or take that before they've even really gotten their food right. And they've started experimenting and nothing's really helped, or it's thrown things off a bit. So just to remind them the importance, just getting enough protein, don't hold back on the sugars when your body's calling out for them, knowing the right sugars, getting more salt. I think people need to be reminded of the simplicity of diet first and foremost, and then sure, those things can be super beneficial on top of that, but it isn't the fuel going in the first place.
I mean, we've talked about it so many times on the show, but yeah, it really is like you take thyroid, then you're going to need more copper or vitamin A or zinc, and liver and oysters are like those foods that contain those. And so it can definitely be real tricky to get things in order when there's a deficiency in one way or the other. But yeah, and your Instagram, like I mentioned already, is like a great resource. And so when I was making my Instagram, I like consciously chose to be mainly foods because it just seemed like people would say, "Oh, Ray Pete is so confusing because I have like no idea what to eat," you know. And so I like tried to put foods together to hopefully inspire some ideas about it. But yeah,
I think I also do that subconsciously more too. Every now and then I'll post a little quote or something a bit more profound. Sometimes I can't be bothered with the comments or the people who haven't taken the time to read the link I've put or whatever it may be. I think even when I posted something about Georgi, I think it might have been a study you found where there's that level of chromosomal damage even with people who skip breakfast, particularly with athletes, things like that. Yep. And putting something about that, mainly just to remind people that eat breakfast, it's not that hard. Get up in the morning, cortisol's high, let's just reduce stress, get on with the day. Oh, and there were some really stabbing responses like that. I've really offended the paleo ways or whatever it may be. But yeah, so I find if I just post some food ideas, getting into the complexity with clients one-on-one a bit.
Well, I feel like talking to you guys, you're some of like the only people in the world that I feel like we share similar experiences, because if you come out in some capacity and you say, hey, I think this Ray Pete guy is onto something, you're going to get a certain level of shit just like thrown your way no matter what, basically. And so, yeah, I'm sure we could talk all day about that.
That's why we need each other.
Yeah, I don't get that many emails from females with fertility problems, but the ones that I did get, I asked them to measure prolactin and estrone, and not all of them, but some of them did, and the ones that did, both came back elevated. And they were really surprised because when they approached the doctor, and I have a study actually, which is I think I posted was one of the latest ones, that is estrone, which rises with age, even though estradiol after menopause is almost undetectable. And it's for some reason doctors are so gung-ho on measuring estradiol because this is indeed the most potent endogenous estrogen, and all doctors unfortunately think that that's the estrogen, the only estrogen that matters. And after the ovaries quote unquote fail, right, both progesterone and estradiol in the blood, the levels become undetectable, and the doctors have used this to say, oh, you have an estrogen deficiency. But that study showed that estrone, which easily converts into estradiol or estriol, so estrone is kind of like the precursor estrogen of all the others. Estrone rises with age, and the older the woman, the higher the estrone levels are. So the women that I responded to when they tested either estrone or prolactin, either one or both, depending on what they tested, came back elevated. And one of them tried bromocriptine and got pregnant within a month, and the other one tried high-dose progesterone, and while she was on the high-dose progesterone, she didn't get pregnant, but it did lower her estrone levels, and as soon as she stopped the progesterone, after using for 2 months, she got pregnant too. And both women have been trying for years. And when they went to the doctor and said, why don't you test my estrone, their doctor snapped at them and said, what the hell is that? Who are you to think you're going to teach me, what is estrone? And surprising, the doctors themselves were shocked to find out that there is this thing called estrone, right? It's mostly produced by the fatty tissue. And maybe that's why they don't measure it. Unless you're overweight, no doctor will think of measure your estrone. And even the ones that, if you're overweight, many, if not most doctors, they either don't know about it, they don't consider it important, or I don't know what the reason is. But it's estrone happens to be, especially estrone sulfate, happens to be the most reliable indicator of your total body estrogen stores. It's the best known prognostic biomarker
for both developing and dying from breast cancer, colon cancer, and prostate cancer. Yet doctors are virtually, they've never heard of it, and when you try to get it tested, they yell at you. Not me, but at the people that I told, and the doctors were flabbergasted. But luckily, and hopeful, and not hopefully, but like giving me hope, one doctor agreed to prescribe bromocriptine, lower the prolactin, and the woman got pregnant. So some doctors are willing to listen, but not many.
How many?
I mean, I'd be interested in your actual education, Emma, but like when I was coming to Ray, one of the interesting ideas was he was saying that all the forms of estrogen were involved in inhibiting the oxidative metabolism, whereas the alt hair loss communities that I was a part of in the bodybuilding groups and things, they were always saying that estradiol is very bad, but I'm sure you need these substances to some degree, but you want to mimic the good estrogens, and they would say estrone and estriol. Is that the other one?
Yeah, they're weaker. They have a weaker affinity for the receptor, if you believe in receptors, but they're just as, they're still estrogens, and again, estrone is just the more oxidized version. It's got one ketone group. Estradiol only has got two hydroxyl groups. Anyways, long story short, estrone, it by itself can activate the estrogen receptor and also easily converts into estriol and estradiol as well.
Well, what you just said, there a difference in unsaturation? Because that I know.
No, they both have 3 double bonds. The A ring. What the difference is how many hydroxyl groups they have. Mm-hmm. So estradiol has 2 hydroxyl groups at position 3 and position 19. Mm-hmm. And then estrone is almost the same as estradiol, but instead of position 19, instead of a hydroxyl group, has a carbonyl group, a ketone, right? Mm-hmm. So it's slightly more oxidized than estradiol, and that's what makes it weaker, right? It's a partially oxidizing agent, while estradiol is an antioxidant, which shows you immediately why estradiol is so bad for cancer, because cancer cells are thrive in an antioxidant-rich environment, in a reduced environment. Mm-hmm. And an estriol has 3 hydroxyl groups, but it's estradiol that's normally measured, and most doctors don't want to get bothered with the other estrogens unless they suspect you have an estrogen-producing tumor, and then they send you over to an endocrinologist who will do biopsies and whatnot. But as part of the normal lab work, estrone and estrone sulfate are almost never tested. I've spoken to OBGYNs. They don't want to hear about it. Standard practice is test progesterone, test estradiol, and leave me the heck alone.
Okay, I'm going to, in an effort to stop this echo, I'm going to put on these headphones. Can you guys, is that better? Because
Yeah, can you hear the same? Yep.
I think so.
Okay, the people are talking about a really bad echo. Okay, I'm just waiting before we move on. Is it okay, guys?
I thought it was okay even before. Yeah, I didn't get that bad echo.
I think it's not on our end because we're all talking to each other through Skype, but I think it's when we go through OBS, there's some kind of echo. And now nobody's telling me if it's okay or not. Okay, we'll just go ahead and move on here. Man, it's like weird talking to these things. Okay, let me turn this down. Okay, so we went through the niacinamide may restore female fertility into old age. The one thing we didn't talk about is I feel like there's a lot of information on IVF and aspirin. Have either of you guys come through that?
Yeah, I've seen aspirin and DHEA. Recently, DHEA is all the rage. 3 human trials show that a vaginal dosage of only 6.5 milligrams once a day for 2 weeks restored fertility in women that were thought to be beyond recovery. Basically, even in vitro didn't work for them. But basically after this intervention, these women conceived naturally. Not all of them, but I think it was 40%. And before that, they were all infertile. Basically, doctors were telling them there's nothing we can do for you.
Still an echo. I sorry guys. I honestly don't know. I tried turning down Georgi and Emma. Volume is a bit too low now. Jesus Christ. We'll just have to roll with the punches. I honestly don't know. There's almost nothing I can do about it. But we'll keep going because we can understand each other fine.
Barely concentrated.
Growing pains. Did you want to talk about this is another article on hate.me, but 2 common iron supplements may cause aggressive GI cancer? Because that's something steeped in pregnancy lore, that you need to eat a massive amount of iron pills and things like that. And that's a general issue, I think, for women in general. Many people have told me that they were prescribed iron pills or something like that.
Yeah, and if you read the article, actually the study said that it's not just the supplements, but it's one of the forms of iron used in food fortification. So, and even in very low amounts, dramatically increased a biomarker of like it was like a colon or stomach cancer in an animal model. So even if you don't take the iron supplements, if you're eating commercial food with anything starchy in it, I mean, I can speak only about the United States, you're ingesting a significant amount of this specific iron salt. And the study said basically that this raises serious questions about the safety of fortified commercial food. And by law in the United States, I think any starchy food has had iron added to it. So if you're buying mashed potatoes, even if the prepackaged, if you're buying bread, if you're buying tortillas, if you're buying chips, anything with starch in it, I think is basically has had thiamine, which is vitamin B1, niacin, vitamin B6, pyridoxine, and iron. These are the 4 requirements at the very least to be added as fortification to the food. So it becomes nearly impossible to avoid being exposed to this, to this low amount of iron, which was found to be carcinogenic because, unless you get like raw food and you cook it yourself at home, you will probably be exposed to this iron salt one way or another. It's virtually everywhere. I mean, this ferrous sulfate is being added to everything, even drinks at this point.
And isn't like a reason somebody would be prescribed iron, that can be from high estrogen, is that right?
Yeah, estrogen lowers hemoglobin. So basically, the doctor will typically test and that's the other thing. Like the anemia tests are, most doctors don't do the full panel that's required to diagnose iron deficiency anemia, right? So most doctors will simply do serum iron, but you need to do serum iron, like a complete blood count to see the red blood cells, and also do like hemoglobin and hematocrit. And on top of that, you need the full iron panel, which is the serum iron, ferritin, transferrin, and iron saturation index. And I think if you really want to do it the right way, you also need to test for copper, manganese, and ceruloplasmin, because all of these together kind of give you an idea of your iron store and basically whether your iron homeostasis is working as it's supposed to be. Sometimes if you have like truly low iron, copper can fill in for it somewhat, right? Sometimes you can have like which is called an anemia of chronic disease, which is really not anemia of chronic disease, but it's not really anemia because your ferritin is high, but your serum iron is low, and the doctors will sometimes put you mistakenly on an iron supplement because they will only test your serum iron. They think you're low, but you're already overloaded, and it's basically ferritin is an inflammatory biomarker, and when it's high, all this iron is already in your cell. So the last thing you need is actually to give these people, iron supplements. You actually need to bleed them, of all things, so that they lose some of that excess iron. But that's not what doctors do. So if you're going to your doctor and the doctor is saying you have anemia, I would seriously question and demand to see the test that the doctor used to diagnose it. Because in my experience, most primary care practitioners would often go on only one test, which is the serum iron. They won't even test the red blood cells. So this is woefully inadequate, and like I said, in some cases actually can really get you into trouble. If your serum iron is low, the doctor doesn't test your ferritin, and it turns out you have so-called anemia of chronic disease, which is really chronic iron overload. The last thing you need is to be given iron supplements.
Sweet. Okay, I think I fixed the echo, but I did have to turn myself down substantially, so I'll try to keep this close to my mouth. Okay. Drinking fluoridated water during pregnancy may lower IQ in sons. Emma, do you know Australia? What do they put a lot of fluoride into the water?
Yeah.
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 Do you have some kind of filter to get it out?
Apparently, they don't really work for, well, not the ones I know of, for fluoride. I think they can get a lot of the other things out, but Yeah, I get asked a lot, which filter should I get for my tap water? And I just say, I just drink my milk and orange juice and let the orange trees and cows filter it for you. Yeah, no, tricky to avoid in Australia. And then you got to consider you're bathing in it, showering in it. Yeah, there was up until only about 9 years ago, I think. A few of our states didn't have fluoridated water, and then all of a sudden it was in the news that we've got fluoride, and everyone was thrilled. But I think most states now.
Was this like a mainstream article? Because a few of my friends forwarded it to me, and so this, I guess, hit the mainstream almost.
Oh, you mean this latest study?
Yeah.
So I like this one for two reasons. Number one, this is based on the largest study to date, which looked at like tens of thousands of people. And most of the other studies with fluoride's effects on cognitive function have been fairly small, which has allowed the water industry to attack these as like insignificant or like, biased and whatnot. But if you read the article, like the popular article, it actually is really good because it shows that from the very beginning the fluoridation of the water was proposed, it was already a controversy. Like people at the very beginning started raising questions about, we don't think fluoride is safe. Well, it needs to be tested before you start putting it in the water. It all started in Michigan in 1945. But the second reason I like this article is that basically at this point it's indisputable that fluoride exposure at even lower levels than what's found in tap water actually has the same detrimental effects on cognitive function as lead. So we're not talking about an IQ point here and there and maybe 1 in 10,000 cases. You're basically getting lead toxicity, the equivalent of lead toxicity, which is indisputable. And many doctors actually in DC now it's allowed that children are tested periodically for lead toxicity because it's known that DC water and many other, like I think you remember the Flint, Michigan issue, like the high lead because of the pipes. So lead toxicity is known even in mainstream medicine to be extremely bad for the brain and have long-term effects. And now the study is saying fluoride is at least as bad, if not worse, because guess what? Most people are voluntarily ingesting on a daily basis.
Well, to what Emma said, like I drink like no water, and except when I'm making coffee, and I think I've probably shared this story, but this is one of the things that made me really attracted to Ray. Is I'll try to keep this story short, but when I was zero carb, I would see my girlfriend at the time, and I'd have like ED if I drank a ton of water before seeing her. And it was just something I knew. I didn't know why. I didn't know about prolactin or whatever. And so I would know that if I was going to go see her, I wouldn't drink a lot of water that day. And then getting introduced to Ray Pete and knowing that just water loading can increase prolactin, I was like, oh, that kind of makes a lot of sense. And of course, I think that was happening because my metabolic rate was so profoundly low and my prolactin probably was just so high that the water really affected it. But again, it's crazy how these small things like drinking water, and that's not even including the fluoridation or the other toxic elements in the water. But yeah, I think Ray has said similar things, like he doesn't drink glasses of water because it's essentially stressful.
Yeah. Up until the 1940s in the United States, giving somebody to drink 1 liter of pure water was used as a test for epilepsy. And they didn't know why it works, but it was a very reliable test. So, if somebody would come to the hospital or complain to the doctor, they feel like they're about to seize up or something, or they've been having these episodes that they're precursors to a seizure, the doctor will ask them to drink 1 liter of water in a hospital setting. And if they start seizing up, then basically it was an indication that they're either pre-epileptic or epileptic. And they didn't know why, but then later on it turned out that water actually, if you drink a lot of unsalted water without any electrolytes, it raises prolactin and estrogen. And recently, I don't know if you remember the study that came out that said that if you give aromatase inhibitors are even more potent than the most potent drug currently in clinical use at stopping seizures. So conversely, anything that raises estrogen/prolactin will probably be, it's a good way to give people seizures, and people knew that back in the day, but it's not a hospital use test anymore.
Okay, so I'm just gonna monitor my volume in real time now, which is something I've never done. I don't know why this is so crazy.
There's always some things.
But okay, so we'll just move on to the next one. Emma, did you have an affinity for any of these?
All of them.
Okay, let's. We were talking about this mitochondrial damage and fatty acid buildup, not glucose, may drive diabetes. Did you want to talk about this one, Georgie?
Yeah, I think this is a monumental study because it's just one study, but as you can see from the statements of the study authors, they themselves were shocked because the paradigm, which continues to this day, hopefully this will change, but continues to this day, is that type 2 diabetes is driven by chronic inflammation, and then chronic inflammation is driven by excessive consumption of carbs, of carbohydrates, especially sucrose, right? And they found out that that's not the case, that the chronic inflammation in diabetes is actually driven by a buildup of fat inside the cell, and also they found damaged mitochondria in the cells of people with type 2 diabetes. So they said that the paradigm needs to change, and not only that, but the current approach of giving people drugs to lower blood glucose, at the very best, maybe misguided or insufficient, and at worst, maybe making things worse. And as I posted a study in that thread, it shows that all the drugs currently on the market that lower HbA1c, they increase all-cause mortality. And the cause is unknown, but I think we know it right there. Is basically, it's not the glucose that's the villain, something else is going on. And, buildup of fat is one thing, but what could be causing, damage to the mitochondria? Most endocrinologists don't like to speak about it, but adrenaline and cortisol and estrogen are three known endogenous villains, quote unquote, that are known to damage mitochondria and allow the cell to basically rupture and spill its internal constituents into the bloodstream. So if you check the blood of people with type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes, you'll see basically a lot of mitochondrial RNA and DNA. You'll see elevated levels of the enzyme lactate dehydrogenase, which is an enzyme which should be in the cell, it shouldn't be outside. It coincidentally also happens to be a biomarker of cancer. We talked about this in one of the earliest podcasts that we did with you. So basically something is damaging the cell, and it's making the cell leak its mitochondrial contents into the bloodstream. And the three things that are known to do that endogenously when elevated to a certain level are cortisol, adrenaline, and estrogen. So hopefully we'll see medicine explore more this angle. But at the very least now we know that fat is a villain in type 2 diabetes, and it's something that the paleo community and most endocrinologists that I've talked to, they don't want to acknowledge it. Not only that, but as you know, they recommend people to completely cut off sugar and go and load themselves up on fat. And remember the study that we discussed on the last show that showed that low-carb diets directly cause liver insulin resistance, which is the very last step before full-blown diabetes type 2.
Emma, is it difficult? Like, is somebody generally aware of your pro-sugar approach, or is it something you have to painstakingly explain?
I think because I don't purposely put myself out there or advertise generally. I think people have had to find me through certain routes. So in that way, they hopefully have come across my articles or things that I'm linked to, and they either go, no, she's a nutbag, I'm not going to consult with her, or this makes sense. And then they've kind of been, exposed to the information first, and they're open to listening. Or they've just come off trying to do ketosis or a paleo diet or something, cause themselves a lot of harm, feel terrible for it, and then they're open to listening, I think.
No, you were muted. We heard
I can
you.
hear you. We can, maybe no one else can.
I have to mute myself, or I think I'm going to cause an echo. So we have mutual friends, Kitty and Craig, and they run New Strength, and they are very gung-ho about just repeat in general. Do you sense anything happening in Australia? Because I feel like I talk to a lot of people that are aware of him there. And maybe it's just because I remember Australia, but there seems to be something going on there.
Yeah, look, I think it's down to a few of us. Yeah, I suppose, sharing the message a bit and trying to re-educate. But there was a big drive for the whole, they call it quitting sugar movement within the past 10 years. And there were some popular books come out and, celebrities and whatnot. But they've kind of drifted off a bit. Some have closed shop, don't have, they have their own health issues. So I think people have come around and it's I don't think it's pushed quite as heavily. But yeah, look, I think it comes down to people feeling it for themselves, trying it for themselves and not feeling so good. But it's still the general consensus. If you turn on a news show or something and they have anything to do with diet, lifestyle, whatever, it's going to be that thing of sugar is evil, keep it out, don't touch it.
Georgie, you might have mentioned it, but what is driving that HbA1c? Because I've had people, I can recall one email of somebody wanting my HbA1c before they would try anything that Pete suggested.
Well, it's just like a long-term biomarker of your average blood glucose levels over the last 3 to 6 months. So that's all it is, right? So it basically shows you how Randall cycle blocked you were in regards to fat, right? And I know people who are type 2 diabetics, they've been emailing me, and just taking niacinamide or aspirin, even in very low doses, dramatically drops their HbA1c. I think it's rather obvious that the glucose is not the villain here, but there's another thing called the advanced glycation end products, and I think that's what the diabetes industry has been using to blame sugar, because they're saying that it can only form in the presence of glucose, but they forget to mention that if you actually have elevated fatty acids in the blood, the formation of these H products happens about 40 to 50 times faster. So yes, sugar may be required for these to form, but in order for, the amount that forms is also important, and the level found in diabetic people can only form if there's a PUFA overload. And people who change their diet to eat more saturated fat or use niacinamide to lower lipolysis or aspirin and or progesterone, any other anti-lipolytic chemical, basically they find that their advanced glycation end products drop as well, even though their blood sugar may stay high. So it's very easy to test and disprove that, but it's such a central dogma to the idea that sugar is the villain. And so many drugs are at this point developed that target specifically HbA1c that I don't think we're going to see a paradigm shift anytime soon, unless the side effects of these drugs, the H1B targeters, the HbA1c targets, continue. I don't know if you've seen, but now they have a black box warning for causing acute pancreatitis, which can be lethal in about 10 to 20% of the cases. The actor, what was his name? Ashton Kutcher. I don't know if you know, but he ended up in a hospital with acute pancreatitis because when he was preparing to, when he was shooting the movie about Steve Jobs, basically he went on an extreme vegan diet, I think, and that's how he ended up in the hospital. And it freaked him out because we all know what Steve Jobs died from, and apparently Steve Jobs has had several acute pancreatitis attacks in the past before he developed cancer. Anyways, long story short, there's plenty of evidence that fat is, even if you assume that sugar is not good, there's plenty of evidence that fat is required for the development of type 2 diabetes, yet nobody talks about that. And the other thing is, currently the currently approved cure for type 2 diabetes by FDA is going on a starvation diet, which, guess what it does? You lose almost all of your extra subcutaneous fat, right? Not just subcutaneous, but like central and visceral as well. So isn't that the direct proof that it's the fat that's the issue? Like you're not losing your glucose, because you only store the glucose, about 500 grams of it as glycogen in your liver, and maybe another 500 grams around your tissues, mostly in the muscle. So it can't be the glucose, because you run out of glycogen
within the first few hours of starvation, yet you don't stop becoming diabetic. You only reverse your diabetes when all the extra fat is gone. But again, nobody talks about that. Like if you try to discuss with a endocrinologist or even your primary care practitioner, they will shut you down and put you on metformin.
Well, just to step back a little bit, when somebody is getting a high HbA1c back, they're tending to make an assumption that it is because of the dietary carbohydrate that they're eating.
Yes,
when
exactly.
in reality it could be the gluconeogenesis.
Yes, high cortisol.
Keeping the glucose level chronically high.
Yeah, there is a study using that toxic drug. It's not toxic, but it's less beneficial than progesterone, RU486, the abortion pill. I don't know if you know, but it was developed by a French company in the 1950s as a glucocorticoid antagonist. From the very beginning, it was designed as a drug, as a cortisol blocker. But the company was very astute, very smart. They noticed that the feminist movement is picking up steam, and they said, well, we're not going to make a lot of money by selling this drug to people that have Cushing syndrome, right? There aren't that many. It's a rare condition, unless you want to sell it to horses, where the condition is much more prevalent. But anyways, they said, let's market it as an abortion pill because it also blocks the progesterone receptor. And basically, that's how RU486 became known as the abortion pill. In reality, it was a cortisol blocker pill from the very beginning. Long story short, RU486 is known to plummet HbA1c by taking it for just a few days, which shows you that cortisol is integral. It's crucial in the development of type 2 diabetes, and it shouldn't come as a surprise, right? It blocks the effects of insulin. It increases the storage of fat, right? It activates the synthesis of fat as well, the fatty acid synthase enzyme. All of these things, or it causes directly liver insulin resistance. I posted a study on that as well. So cortisol is, the stress. In other words, stress is intimately involved, if not the cause of type 2 diabetes. And this is known. All of this evidence is published, reviewed. For some reason, it doesn't make it to the clinic, until last year. And now, actually, there is a clinical trial with RU486 and about 100 men with type 2 diabetes, but it's still ongoing. We don't know the results yet. So if this gets published and the results are positive, I think we may finally start seeing some change in people addressing diabetes as an endocrine disease and not as a gluttony disease.
Speaking of high blood sugar, Emma, during your pregnancies, was gestational so-called diabetes ever an issue?
Well, I never quite got the test done because leading up to it, I remember at the time I was having a bit of a brain fog pregnant day, and I turned up for the test, and I'd quickly gulped down some orange juice or something that morning, just instinctively. And I got to the test. They said, "You've been fasting since last night?" I went, "No, I forgot." So then she said, "You need to go home, come back tomorrow, come back fasted. You got to sit around for 4 hours and do the drink and everything else." And at the time, I just thought, that just seems so wrong. I'm heavily pregnant. You're encouraging me to fast, and I'm needing to eat all the time. So I went back to my obstetrician, and he started doing me a little lecture of why I needed to have it checked and everything. And I'm pretty tiny. I've always been very slim. Even when I was massively pregnant, I didn't have anything else on me. And he was halfway through his little lecture, and then he looked at me and he goes, "You know what? You probably know more about this than I do, and you don't look like a candidate for diabetes." He goes, "Don't worry about it." So I didn't. And then the next pregnancy, I didn't know that. But not to say I'm, telling people not to use it, but it's interesting. And then from the conversations I had with Ray on the topic, he was always like, it's to be in a healthy pregnancy, you naturally need higher levels of blood sugar. So are they correlating against what normal blood sugar levels should be, or what a pregnant woman's blood sugar levels should be? Did you agree with that, Georgie?
Not only that I agree, but I noticed that some of the people, we have a family friend who's always had her blood glucose kind of on the low side, like around 65 to 70. And the doctors are always thrilled, right? So basically, this lady got pregnant, and the baby was malnourished, was underdeveloped, and they had to deliver it early. And basically, that baby spent, I think, 3 months in the neonatal intensive care unit. Of course, they fed formula and whatnot, and initially intravenous as well. So the baby is basically is not very healthy now. It's like 3-year-old. Then she had another one, and the exact same thing happened again. And the doctor kept blaming it on genes. And both babies have some kind of a rare condition. I think one of them has like a heart defect. One of the valves isn't completely formed, and then the other one has some kind of a like defect on the spinal column. And nobody in their family, of course, they don't know, like maybe 40 generations earlier. But again, the blame is on their genes, and it's not the fact that this lady basically has had such a low blood sugar level, and she was encouraged to keep it low. But now she's pregnant for the third time, and I think she started listening to Ray. I told her, but she didn't tell me that she started reading his articles, and now she's loading up on the sugar, and basically her sugar is in the 90s, which is perfectly fine, right? And the baby, knock on wood, 7 months, but looks like a perfectly healthy baby. Of course, just an anecdote, doesn't prove anything, doesn't prove everything, proves one thing, that in her case, raising blood sugar was absolutely crucial to the vitality of the fetus. And the first two, where the blood sugar was in the 70s throughout the entire pregnancy, both babies couldn't make it to term and had to be taken out early because the doctor said these babies will do better outside of you than inside of you.
Well, like it seems, I can recall like two close friends who Georgi's going to ninja mode. Two close friends who were like bullied by their physicians about the so-called diabetes, and so the fact that could mean that they could have smarter, more intelligent, healthier kids, and that the doctor is essentially bullying them about it or telling them to intervene in what might be a unsafe way seems real tragic. On the long list of many tragic things that happen. So.
Yeah, and they don't hesitate to put a woman with gestational diabetes on any of the, metformin is, I guess it's like probably the least dangerous of them all. But now I'm starting to see like a trend towards neglecting metformin and starting to push these new drugs, right, that I mentioned, the selective targeters of the HbA1c, and these are really like unproven. Maybe I should say, there's serious doubt that these drugs are even safe, let alone effective. and two of the drugs, actually, the FDA returned the submission paperwork twice to the company and said, even the FDA said, we don't like the data you're presenting. We think that you either massaged the trial, you curated the results, or you did something internally, because in the test that the FDA did, the drug didn't perform nearly as well, and it was not nearly as safe as what the company was claiming. So, these new drugs, as Ray said, the only test is time, and basically it takes about 20 years plus for the really serious side effects to start to be known, right? Because that's how long it takes to develop one of these chronic degenerative diseases, including cancer. But the companies can conveniently claim that it's not them, right? Who knows what you must have done over these 20 years, Maybe, Emma, you started smoking something illicit, or Danny started associating with bad people, and that's what's causing your disease, and not the toxic drug.
Unbelievable.
Full of sugar.
Okay, I'm kind of heartbroken because I guess the echo is still happening. So my apologies, guys. I really nothing is different from our typical live streams, so that's why I didn't think it would be a problem. But we'll go through. Were there any that you were itching to talk about, Georgi, that you had posted about?
I have to load up my browser. Let's see. Yes. Now let's go to the. So I think I already mentioned the estrone, not estradiol, rises with age. It is much more relevant for estrogen-driven diseases. So this is I think it's a great study, because these authors themselves say is like, people, you should stop measuring estradiol. Yes, we all know it's going to be low in menopausal women because it's produced by the ovaries, and so is progesterone. And then, after menopause, the ovaries don't work as well, but it's estrone that keeps rising, and we know that estrone is correlated with all of these diseases. But the one that I really like is drostanolone, a DHT isomer, may treat prostate cancer. This is the first direct evidence that essentially the
the drostanolone is 2-methyl dihydrotestosterone. So it's just one methyl group on top of the strong androgen dihydrotestosterone that was essentially declared as the villain in so many diseases that are plaguing both males and females. In females, they claim it causes polycystic ovary syndrome. In males, it's the male pattern baldness, benign prostate hyperplasia, of course, prostate cancer, and over the last few years, I've seen articles saying that it may be maybe a causative factor in colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, and even esophageal cancer, right? And there have never been studies, to my knowledge, so far that actually took a steroid like that and tested it, whether it would treat the cancer. There were a few trials with testosterone injections in the prostate with men that had terminal prostate cancer, and miraculously, the majority of these went into remission. To this day, the remission continues. But the pharma industry said, "Oh, we don't know if we think that the testosterone was beneficial because inside the prostate it converts into estrogen." That's complete BS. Like, the prostate expresses almost nothing but the enzyme 5-alpha reductase, and the very rationale of the original castration therapies that continue to this day is that the prostate produces DHT, right? So you give these men the finasteride drugs, right? Sometimes you take the entire prostate out precisely because the prostate produces so much DHT. Long story short, this is the first direct evidence where they tested essentially DHT on several cancer lines, and it was found that this DHT derivative was effective on all of them, and one of the cell lines was a highly aggressive prostate cancer, and drostanolone stopped it. So I'm waiting for an in vivo study, but I think the cat is out of the bag. Something that Ray predicted in one of his articles that was written about 10 years ago. He said something along the lines of, "Has anybody thought of treating prostate cancer with testosterone?" And later on, I said in one of my posts, "Has anybody thought of treating prostate cancer with dihydrotestosterone?" So who was that guy who said that everything is 180 degrees reversed in our lifetime, right? Education, like, schools destroy education, hospitals destroy health, politics destroys democracy. Well, as far as the theory on androgens and prostate cancer goes, I think this is starting to, this theory is starting to collapse. We're starting to see direct evidence of the exact opposite.
Okay, so I think I've kind of fixed it, and thanks to James M., who gave me the idea. But I actually had to mute Emma while Georgie was talking to fix the sound. So this might get a little bit annoying, but I think I might have to, you guys might have to, wave or something.
When you're ready to talk.
Yeah, to talk. Or maybe I'll just pick it up when you guys start talking more. But I'll have to quickly navigate to this. Again, my apologies. Live and learn. I'll fix it, and we'll be better. Okay, we talked about estrone and not estradiol. Were any of these other ones? We could probably. We need a sound moderator.
The one immediately under it, estrogen is a stress hormone. It can both potentiate and trigger the effects of stress. That's a fairly rare study, and it's coming out of, I think it was published in JAMA.
Where was that on which one was that?
Yeah, it's right underneath the drostanolone study. It's on my blog.
Oh,
I don't know how
it's a stress hormone.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So great study as well. Basically shows that the authors claim that given their findings of estrogen potentiating or triggering the stress effect, even in the absence of cortisol, even in the absence of ACTH. So they're saying that basically higher estrogen may explain the higher prevalence of depression or bipolar disorder in females. The ratio there is similar to the autoimmune conditions, usually 3-to-1 to 4-to-1 in favor of females. Basically, they have higher incidence of these conditions. And, nobody so far has made the claim that estrogen could be a cause. In fact, I think lately the endocrinology industry is starting to push estrogen as a treatment for all of the, for postmenopausal depression, et cetera, but these people are saying now, no, it's actually a cause. So they're also calling for reversal of some of these brave statements that estrogen could be the rejuvenating hormone. And, I'm sure you've seen, there's now a concerted effort to undermine the findings of the Women Health Initiative study. Over the last 5 years, there have been a lot of papers published that basically said, that study wasn't designed properly. They used too high of a dosage of estrogen. When you use lower dose, it has all these benefits and no side effects. So little by little, the estrogen industry is making a comeback. And I think, that study was published I think it was in JAMA, which is one of the most respectable one, well, in mainstream medicine. It's saying, not, hold your horses, not so fast. We actually think that estrogen it could be a cause in many of the mental health issues that women experience.
Emma, is that a conversation you have often, trying to rearrange somebody's thoughts on, or maybe specifically women that think estrogen is the main female hormone?
Yeah, definitely. When they're trying to put together why they have the symptoms they have, and and the times they've been to the doctor, they've just been told, just go on the pill, you need HRT, whatever it may be. But it doesn't take much for them to understand how it all really does work. I think just give them a little bit of the reading and things just kick in, and they tend to kind of go, that makes so much sense. And then if they do the carrot salad, maybe do a little bit of progesterone, all of a sudden symptoms dissipate pretty quickly for a lot of people. That enough is, yeah.
With somebody that has been taking estrogen for a long time, is there any general approach? Is it graded doses of progesterone or a good diet? Like that seems challenging, because when somebody gets off estrogen, they could be real tired, right? Because they've been running on such a high stress state, right?
Me? Yeah, although I think most of the women I work with have got themselves off the pill or whatever it was first, because they felt so bad on it. I don't know, they just instinctively knew this is just not working for me. So I'm rarely trying to help women get off it. They've gotten off it, and they know that it wasn't good for them, or it just didn't make sense to them. So then I guess just helping them clear the accumulated estrogen or get things back in a better ratio. But yeah, I think it's just something that sort of didn't resonate with them well in the first place, particularly HRT. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, just balancing this mute process. Okay.
I got two others that I wanted to mention real quick. One of them is related because it's again about estrogen and pregnancy, and it made quite the waves on Reddit that estrogen excess during pregnancy may be a cause of autism, right? And I think that's huge, because there have been so many studies that initially linked autism to testosterone, to cortisol even, but all of these were considered inconclusive. And now this study tested basically measured the association of several different hormones, and it was the largest study to date. And all three types of estrogen. Again, there's no such thing as a safe estrogen. All three types of estrogen were the most strongly correlated with the development of autism in the offspring later on, while all of the other hormones like progesterone, testosterone, and even cortisol were either very weakly or not correlated at all. And the other one I wanted to mention is that progesterone, in addition to preventing lethality from endotoxin excess, actually may be able to directly bind and deactivate endotoxin directly. I think that's huge, because you can start thinking of progesterone and related steroids, because the study talks about Selye, Hans Selye, and other researchers doing studies with spironolactone and other pregnane-derived steroids, and they all had similar effect. So we may have, and we already posted studies on pregnenolone blocking the endotoxin response to TLR4, right? So, but this is bigger, because just like charcoal, these pregnane steroids, progesterone specifically, may be able to directly chelate endotoxin, for lack of a better word, so it has a double action. It is a TLR4 antagonist, so it blocks the effects of endotoxin, but it also helps to bind and deactivate it directly. And I've seen evidence that it's potentially capable of doing the same with estrogen as well.
Okay. Do you guys want to take calls?
Sure.
Okay, it's probably a really bad idea. Okay, if you guys have super chats, now is the time to do that. Let's go through the super chats, and then we'll basically bow out with calls. And it's kind of sad that we're finally getting the sound thing handled towards the end of the show. But That's what that it is. What it is, I guess. Okay, what I was gonna say is just take a break to say thank you guys for watching. Please like this episode. That really helps. Warmaranth says Boomer Tech, and he's right. So we have live streams every other Friday, and not this next week, but the week after. Jawhead is going to be joining us for a 3-person stream, so I should have the issues fixed by then. Again, all super chats are donated to Raymond Pete, and we've accumulated a good amount of cash for him so far. So anything you ask us will be donated to him. And then we didn't really talk about it, but we have an Idea Labs giveaway, right, Georgie? Yep. So yeah, we'll do 4 products with Georgie is extremely gracious, so thank you. And you just have to subscribe, leave a comment, and again, like the episode. And we already announced the winners earlier. So thank you guys so much. Sincerely appreciate it. I have an amazing audience. And thank you to Georgie and Emma for joining me on this this tech shit show of an episode. So thank you guys. Really appreciate that. I have both you guys muted right now. Oh, that was really bad. Okay.
Well, we didn't say anything, so it's not on all of us.
This is like too much to take in for me. Okay, so we're finished with the articles. Let's go to the super chats. So let me switch back screens right here. Go to super chats. Georgie, what are you working on right now?
I'm working on basically a serotonin antagonist, a new product. Actually, 2 of them. One of them is a serotonin antagonist. The other one is an inhibitor of tryptophan hydroxylase. So we'll see which one I like better. I mean, hopefully I can release both. But as I've said before, I always test on myself for a few months just to see, what can happen if somebody, inadvertently ingests the whole bottle or applies to the wrong place on their body. But so far the results seem pretty promising. Also, as part of this group that I met of scientists that I met in Bulgaria, some of them are chemists, and basically we're going to try to synthesize some more powerful quinones, a more powerful oxidizing agent. After we, there are several ways to do that, but so we're trying to do something similar to what the Dr. William Koch did back in the early 20th century. That molecule ethylene dione that he synthesized, but happens to be fairly unstable. So the chemists think that they can synthesize something of similar potency, but it'll be a much more stable and safer molecule. It will be based off of vitamin K. And if that works, I'll send it to Ray. Of course, there'll be a study published with it that goes with it. So if he likes it and thinks it's okay, we should be able to release that as a new product as well.
Okay, and Emma, same question to you. What are you working on right now?
Constantly juggling clients, children. No, actually, I'm formulating with Kitty at the moment. You're talking about Kitty at New Strength. So, yeah, just purely out of desperation from years of clients who were, slowly cleaning up their diets and their pantries and becoming aware of the PUFAs particularly. Diligently trying to keep them really low, but then realising they were slathering moisturiser over their bodies on a daily basis and seeing closely what's in them. People would always ask, well, what should I be using on my skin then? Because I'm going to be absorbing some of that, aren't I? So we would just generally sort of suggest, well, apart from some coconut oil, keep away from most of the products. There wasn't anything we genuinely could recommend. So we got to a point where we thought, oh, come on, there's got to be something out there that's better than this. We're just going to have to make it ourselves. So we're working with a lab at the moment, and they're putting together my short list of favourite ingredients, but keeping it predominantly saturated, mostly naturally saturated oils. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that starts to come together soon. But yeah, it's particularly you get to Melbourne winter and you got these messy hunks of coconut oil, and it just doesn't go on well. But yeah, it's fun and exciting to make something.
Well, I was going to say, do you have an ETA or anything that for more information? You guys aren't there yet.
Yeah, well, we're on social media. We're literally, giving people updates on where we're at with the formulation. But Saturé is the name, Saturee, which means saturated in French. And yeah, there should be updates on my Instagram as well. Kitty, if you look up Kitty Blomfield, we'll keep you posted. And I'll be sending you a box load, Danny.
Okay.
And you too, Georgie.
Okay, thank you.
You can be my guinea pigs. My
Please. I like doing that. I mean, I've been doing it to myself for 5 years. So.
Yeah, man.
Okay, this muting thing is getting pretty crazy. Okay, so
What-
I'm gonna
what were you doing
like
again?
toss these questions to Georgie, and then Emma. Emma, if you want to say anything, just give me a heads up, and I'll unmute you. Because Schman Frontal, just a minute. I'm gonna mute both of you. This is a nightmare. Okay, Schman Frontal says, Georgie, I've used rifaximin, but my SIBO didn't disappear. Any recommendations what to try now? What dosage? Sugar blows my intestine up. Rome held. I don't even know what that means.
What's Rome help? I don't know about Rome help, but I can tell you, like the rifaximin, sometimes it takes several months of usage to take care of a particularly severe case of SIBO. And also, I think the effects can be amplified by increasing the production of stomach acid, which depends on carbon dioxide. So things that raise carbon dioxide, such as using sodium bicarbonate in orange juice, or like vitamin B1, or methylene blue, or even acetazolamide. Or if you don't, because acetazolamide is a prescription drug, the anti-acid drug famotidine, and I posted quite a few threads on it. It turns out that it's a very potent inhibitor of carbonic anhydrase, more potent than even acetazolamide, and it's available over the counter, I think, in most countries around the world. So any remedy, in other words, any remedy that raises carbon dioxide will improve the production of gastric acid. And it's been shown that in many cases, just restoring the production of gastric acid gets rid of the SIBO. And actually, that's why it started to, in the first place, is because food that was ingested and had bacteria in it, there wasn't enough acid in the stomach to destroy that bacteria, and it started colonizing the small intestine as well. So hypothyroidism, lack of stomach acid, and SIBO go hand in hand almost always. So again, my recommendation, raise CO2 and potentially take the rifaximin for a longer period of time. I would ask a doctor as well, because they can do the breath test and kind of determine whether the SIBO is really subsiding or maybe some other issue there as well. Bloating can be caused, again, even without SIBO, just not having enough stomach acid can cause the bloating as well. Any undigested food that makes it past the stomach, it tends to cause bloating and irritation if it's not properly digested by the hydrochloric acid in the stomach.
Emma, do you have anything you typically do when you suspect that somebody has like a chronic intestinal problem? Like, haven't we talked about maybe the bacteriophages before, or no?
Yeah, we've talked. Yeah, I think you've tried them. I've tried a couple of them, but I think first and foremost with my clients is just getting them to acknowledge what is digestible food to start with. And if they've been living off salads and muesli bars and nuts, just swapping the food around and getting them aware of what is digestible to a human and keeping that really simple. For some people, that's enough to see the improvements. But then obviously if they've been doing that for a while, or they can't tolerate things as simple as sugar or milk, I guess, the things like Georgie says, if it correlates with being hypothyroid to begin with, supporting thyroid, and the salt element. I don't think anyone's having much salt or enough salt, and really upping the salt can make a big difference too. But yeah, the Phage sort of strains, I haven't gone down that path too heavily. Have you been recommending that? Have you found good benefits yourself?
I don't know why I thought we had talked about it one
I think
time.
we touched on it.
Maybe. I don't have to be honest, a strong opinion about it. So I went through 2 bottles of the Andrew. I mean, maybe you're. I went through 2 bottles of the Andrew MacArthur Fluorophage, but then Ray seems to be talking mostly about the Fluorocyst from Life Extension. And so, but I never got into hold of it. I've always been in Mexico, and I probably could get it now, but I just keep forgetting, and my digestion is fine, so I haven't really been eager to experiment. But yeah, those over-the-counter things are always interesting to me, because when you talk about erythromycin or minocycline, it's like just a total, you're imposing like a headache on the person of like going to get it from their doctor or trying to convince them or whatever. So anything that can move a person away from that and be effective is, like Georgi said, all those things that increase carbon dioxide can be really fun.
I stumbled upon it when I was searching for how alcohol affects the organism, and these were all animal studies. So basically, they found out that if you remove the estrogen producing organs of rats, they basically become immune to the detrimental effects of alcohol, both on the liver and on the digestive tract. So a few bodybuilders that keep communicating with me, they told me that basically they had the same issues like bloating, gas, belching, etc. All of things that people typically associate with SIBO, but in their case, it turned out to be simply excess estrogen. So as soon as they stopped their estrogenic steroids, and one of them took an aromatase inhibitor, which bodybuilders normally do, like after they end their steroid usage for like a month or so, all of their digestive symptoms disappeared. So sometimes it could be like, it's not SIBO, but it's basically because estrogen has a powerful like digestive slowing effect, and doing anything to lower or oppose estrogen sometimes can be like dramatically therapeutic almost overnight. This immediately reminded me that most of the digestive inhibitors that are produced by plants are actually themselves estrogenic. And that's not a coincidence. That's why they produce them, because in most mammals, except the ruminants, estrogen or phytoestrogens, in other words, estrogens that are coming with the food, they have a powerful digestive inhibiting effect. So conversely, if you have problems with digestion, and you've tried the antibiotics, you've tried the fluorophage, it's not always a pathogen problem. Sometimes it's an endocrine problem, like high serotonin, high nitric oxide, and of course high estrogen as well.
Sweet. Thank you for that. Okay, this is another one from Shman Frontal, and they say, Georgi, tell me more about functional hypothyroidism. P.S. I like you. And they say, at Danny, it's euro, not pounds, because this person knows that I didn't know what that symbol was next to the $5.
So functional hypothyroidism is basically, like presenting with hypothyroid symptoms in, concurrently with having normal, lab test, right? But what the lab tests consider normal has been changing very quickly. Up until I think a year and a half ago, the upper range of the normal of TSH was like 6.5, and then they suddenly dropped it down to I think 4 in the United States, and in some European countries it was dropped to 2.5, right? So and that's a huge drop. Basically, 50% of the range just disappeared overnight, and now they're telling basically either like one conspiracy theory is like, oh, they just need to increase the number of patients who are diagnosed as hypothyroid so they can prescribe more drugs. Well, there may be an angle of that as well, but multiple studies have shown that nobody with a TSH over 2 has ever been shown to be healthy, to be optimally healthy. So even below 2 is probably where it needs to be. So if you think that you're functionally hypothyroid because your TSH is 3.5, no. in many countries around the world now, you'll be considered subclinically hypothyroid. It's called subclinical hypothyroidism. But usually, basically, the temperature, the pulse, and the Achilles tendon relaxation reflex is, I think the latter is particularly telling, because sometimes you can have high temperature if adrenaline and or serotonin are high, right? And they also raise the heartbeat. So people sometimes can get misled by the fact that their temperature and pulse seem fine, but the Achilles reflex never lies.
Another thing that's very, very indicative is also muscle spasticity. So many people think this is due to electrolyte depletion, but it's actually like partially it's because hypothyroid people don't retain magnesium as well. But it's also similar to the process that happens when people have a seizure, right? So you can think of seizure as an extreme muscle spasticity. And if you start getting these and you're eating your normal diet, basically it strongly suggests that that peripherally not enough of the thyroid hormone T3 is being delivered, or there's something blocking its effects. Elevated free fatty acids can do that. Estrogen, I think, is known to displace T3 from the carrier thyroglobulin, and also interferes with its activity at the receptor level. Vitamin D, apparently, is one of the key factors in allowing T3 to activate the thyroid receptor and basically cause many of these genomic effects, the transcription effects that are relevant, that are expected to happen in a person with normal thyroid function. So if your vitamin D is low, sometimes even taking very high amounts of T3 will not help, because the body will quickly deactivate the T3 into T2 or even T1 if the vitamin D is insufficient. So somehow vitamin D and T3 have a very symbiotic relationship. And if vitamin D is low, I think there's like almost everybody that tests that, like 80% of the population is vitamin D deficient in Western countries. Sometimes people don't get the benefit of even thyroid supplementation if their vitamin D levels are suboptimal or free fatty acids are high. So the functional hypothyroidism, I would define as anything that basically, if you do the three measurements, pulse, temperature, and Achilles tendon reflex, if even one of the three is not working, is not giving you the results that you want to see, that it means either not enough T3 is being produced by the liver, probably because the liver is burdened with excess estrogen, and or something is interfering with the function of the thyroid hormone peripherally, and that in most cases is either estrogen and or low vitamin D.
Emma, anything to add to that?
Yeah, that sums it up, I think.
Okay, this next question is for you, Emma, and it's from DBO514. Thank you, sir, for $2. And he says, Emma, do you have any tips to find sweet oranges?
Yeah, tricky one. And it's important, don't you think? Like you can get pretty pure orange juice from the supermarket here, which doesn't have, well, they say doesn't have enzymes, doesn't have additives, but it's never sweet. It's never sweet enough, I don't think, until if you can be bothered juicing your own or accessing them from, a good market, but everyone's time poor. I'm lucky myself where we live. We've got a good food market where they have one of those juicing machines right there, and you can buy it fresh, and it tastes so much better than the supermarket stuff, which has got to be in storage, and it just doesn't have that same, doesn't make every cell feel happy like the sweet stuff does. But yeah, I don't know. It depends what part of the world you're in, what season it is. But I would go by taste as a big indicator of good orange juice. If it means having to, track down another type of orange or hold out to different parts of the year and swap around other fruits. But yeah, I think a lot of people can still do well with pretty conventional mass-produced orange juice, and they still seem to reap benefits. But I've had other people who are really gut sensitive, and even the most slightly tart orange juice actually causes them more gut disruption than benefit. And it's not until they've searched their area or tracked down better oranges or found a market that makes the fresh stuff, and then they feel fantastic from it. So yeah, probably hard to say without knowing where the person is in the part of the world as well.
Oh, I'm muted. I was asking DBO514, are you asking Emma because you're in Australia too, or you were just curious? I agree completely, and I think I mentioned it in one of that video I made about the repeat. I think it's one of the most underappreciated kind of elements, and I know it's an area that I felt like I just immediately really screwed up on, and then screwed up for years on like drinking tart, sour orange juice that was chronically irritating my stomach, and I was doing it every day. And so it was just like I couldn't solve my own problems I was never going to solve my own problems just because I was contributing it to in every way, shape, and form. The only thing I feel like I have learned is the orange juice concentrates. Like last time I visited San Francisco, I found a market that had like 100% orange juice concentrate, and that stuff it didn't taste that great. Like it wasn't comparable to fresh orange juice, but it didn't bug my stomach. And so I thought, and that was Ray apparently saying that those companies were worrying about being sued from dissolving the pulp in the juice, and so they changed it yet again. And I have no way of confirming or denying that, but for somebody with a sensitive stomach, I could easily digest the orange juice concentrate.
Is actually added to most of the, well, I shouldn't say most, but many of the like non-squeezed types of orange juices. So if it's like like nature's, the common one sold around the United States, if I'm forgetting the name, but you go into CVS or Rite Aid or any grocery store, and they have these, it says not from concentrate, or even if it's from concentrate, many of them, just like even if they're organic, just like the organic milk, silica is used in juices as well. So you really never know until you send a sample to the lab, and they're hoping you won't do it. But I've tested one brand of the one that CVS sells it is from concentrate, and it did have silica in it. So the irritation in your stomach, it's probably not just from the tartness.
Not the pulp.
Many of these commercial juices have many things as additives that are often not even required to be listed on the label.
I mean, that's insane. I had no idea. You're totally right, though.
Right? So you would expect.
Go back 5 seconds. I just unmuted you.
No, I was saying like silica is powdered glass, so you would expect it to irritate any portion of your GI tract, including the esophagus. I mean, some people think that they have GERD, or the laryngopharyngeal reflex disorder, when in reality it's basically silica or some other, either gum or some other like titanium dioxide is also apparently sometimes used in juices. So these things can actually get stuck to your esophagus, and they can cause the irritation because the esophagus clearly doesn't like that, and then it secretes mucus in an effort to get rid of it. And that often feels like you have something stuck on your throat, but it's nothing stuck in your throat. It's a spasm of the esophagus trying to get rid of that junk that's being attached to the walls, and it doesn't know how to get rid of it because it cannot digest it. It's just indigestible.
Okay, we'll move on from that topic. Steph, for $31.41. You're amazing, Steph. You're the best moderator on the planet. Thank you so much. Send that straight to Ray. Shafiel Anauer for $4.99. Thank you, Shafiel. He says, is it possible to regrow hair in areas where hair follicles are shut off? How does genetic give some sort of defense to certain people from stress? I think we've talked about this ad nauseum, but I think it's clear that if a person can manage to tip the scales in that oxidation, anything is possible. But if the real question is what would it take to do that? And I think that is like it's individual and empirical for every person. And it's not something super straightforward. Of course, like I'm interested in the people that take those massive doses of spironolactone or cyproterone acetate or progesterone, and they regrow hair. And I think that shows how powerfully protective progesterone is at shifting towards oxidation and away from the reductive stress. But Georgie's told us about your friend who moved. I don't want to butcher the story, was it? Oh, you know what? Just stop for a second. Okay, go now.
He was an avid mountain climber when I met him in college. He's originally from Italy, and basically he never really liked the educational system. He basically went to college because his parents wanted him to, and they were fairly rich. So the deal was he will go to like an American university and get a degree, and then they'll give him whatever money he wants to do whatever he wants after that. And all he wanted to do is climb mountains. But while he was in college, he basically lost all of his hair, And doctors told him it's hereditary. His father was completely bald by the time he was 22. This guy lost most of his hair by the age of 21. And after that, after he graduated, he went to the Tian Shan Mountains. Tian Shan stands for heavenly. In Chinese mythology, this is where the goddess of immortality lives. So he went there to live in a commune and basically climb mountains and do nothing but, play his guitar, climb mountains, and whatever people in communes do. And then I saw him about 6 years later, and he came back with fully regrown hair. And you could tell that it's not a transplant because basically he cut it several times. I saw him over a span of a few months, and I said, well, what happened? He's like, I really, there's too many things for me to describe, but there's something toxic in the environment you live in. And he didn't mean just America. He said civilized society is really on the downhill and it's nearing the bottom. So he basically said that he doesn't need money. His parents gave him all the money that he wanted, but even that, he doesn't need much to survive there. And that commune was all he needed. I mean, these were people that are, artists, scientists, former lawyers, doctors, whatnot. So he felt completely at home, and he would never go back to civilized society, and he would just live there for as long as he could. And I said, well, what do you have to show for it? And he said, well, look at my hair. It's it all grew back. And I saw his head. Basically, I've seen people with transplanted hair. It's fairly easy to see because you see the scars where they make the incisions on the scalp, and then they basically kind of plant the hair follicles there, from scratch. That's how the hair transplant works. He didn't have any of that, right? And I asked him about finasteride. He denied using it. I have no way of verifying that, but he had a girlfriend, and most people who take finasteride tend to not have girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever their favorite sex is, because finasteride really affects the romantic performance. And he went back to the Tian Shan Mountains. We exchange emails maybe once a year when he goes down. Like basically he climbs down about 2,000 meters to like a local village where they have a telegraph station, and he basically once a week goes and emails his parents and everybody that he wants to email. So about once a year we exchange emails, and he says he has no intention of going back to the civilized world. He basically says, from his opinion, it leads to nothing but an early grave. And everything. He's like, all the stereotypes about the rat race are true, but what's worse is that, in his opinion, his dad told him that up to 30 years ago, you kind of had a chance of winning the rat race, at least getting something out of it for yourself and your children. But apparently now that's long gone. So everybody who stays in the rat race, according to him, is not doing themselves and their offsprings any justice. It's press field. And speaking of hair, of genetic, the genetic aspects of hair loss, people need to keep in mind that you can inherit something. It doesn't need to be genetic, right? So as these studies we posted show that you can pass on the stress field up to 14 generations later. If your parents and grandparents had hair loss and you have it, keep in mind, to this day, there's been no gene, single or group of genes, or even interaction of genes has been discovered that is associated with hair loss. And trust me, the pharma companies have been on it for the last 50 years. They would love for this to be a gene-driven thing, because they can develop a chemical that silences it, or if they discover genes that promote hair growth but were somehow silenced, they would come up with a drug to basically demethylate those genes. Nothing of the sort has ever been found. So it's highly unlikely that this will ever turn out to be a genetic issue. Yes, there is a heredity component of it, but it's most likely epigenetic.
I have a hilarious paper, but it goes through, I think, from like the 50s to the 80s, and it's like a 1980s paper. But they go through all like the authoritative statements about where the gene is that causes hair loss. And the paper just quotes the other papers, but it quotes like 20 papers. And they say, we have found like the baldness gene on allele A or B. Like they'll specify exactly what it is. and then the next paper they quote will give another explanation, and then the next paper will give another explanation. But you just see how
It's the first one and it becomes circular. So if somebody starts to dig in and try to discover who found the original evidence, I actually noticed this with DHT. Apparently, there is no original paper that started to claim that dihydrotestosterone is the cause of prostate cancer. It somehow became a cultural thing, and all the papers that came out simultaneously started citing each other as the original evidence, but there was no paper that came out and said, here is our experiment, and that's what shows that DHT is the villain.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was that the discovery of finasteride, because those guadavoses, I'm sure I'm saying it, it's probably huevidoses or something, but those people lacked prostate. They didn't have benign prostate hyperplasia. And then Merck got wind of that. And the whole reason of creating dutasteride or finasteride or whatever was to originally, I think, for prostate stuff. But we could probably go into that. Okay, let's do one last super chat. And I'm kind of afraid of how bad the call-ins will go because of the sound. So let's just cut our losses and we'll end things after this question. But this is from Mashel Giroskina for $5. Thank you so much, Mashel. And they say, is there a way to test how much cholesterol is in the skin? W.R.T. getting less vitamin D from the sun with age because skin has less cholesterol. I don't know what WRT means. Oh, okay. Sorry, Georgie. Start now.
The amount of cholesterol in the skin increases with age, but it's not the free cholesterol; it's the cholesterol esters. And actually, you can for some reason raw cholesterol, the unesterified version, actually has some effects of breaking down the esters, and that's why some cosmetic formulations, and Emma and I exchanged some emails about that. Some cosmetic formulations are now starting to pop up that are basically adding like unesterified cholesterol as one of the ingredients, because it does have there's been a number of studies in the past showing that it does have a potent anti-aging effect on the skin, and the mechanism of action is unknown, but I've seen other studies which show that adding unesterified cholesterol to a medium that has been saturated with the esters tend to break some of them down. So you can test your skin. I mean, it's very easy to take like basically a tiny skin biopsy sample just by scraping your skin, and the doctor knows how to do it. A dermatologist can do it pretty easily. It's not painful because they only need a few cells. But it's, I think it will show that, I don't know if the test actually distinguishes between the cholesterol esters and the unesterified cholesterol. I doubt that you're going to find low cholesterol in there, because I think all the labs take the cholesterol and cholesterol esters as being equivalent, and they're not. If you find a lab that can distinguish between the different types, I think then it would be beneficial, because my expectation is that it will show that unesterified cholesterol is low. And that's actually, it happens to be the case in most organs and tissues with advanced aging. And esterified, the cholesterol esters are actually, the body doesn't have the enzymes to convert that cholesterol into the downstream steroids. And I think that's what explains partially the increased cholesterol with age in the blood, right? Because the body tries to compensate for what it perceives as a relative deficiency of cholesterol inside the cell, because it has a lot of cholesterol, but all of it is in the form of esters, which cannot be used for synthesizing the steroids. So, yeah, I mean, you can do the biopsy test. Yes, there is a test, but make sure that if you spend any money on it, you email the lab and make sure that their tests do distinguish between the different kinds of cholesterol. Otherwise, you're going to get a result back that says, yes, there's a ton of cholesterol in your skin, when in reality, just as with the diabetics and the high blood glucose, there is actually a relative deficiency of that nutrient. So yeah, that will be my advice. Just make sure, challenge the lab to prove that they do know the difference between cholesterol and its esters, and the tests are reliable.
Okay, I lied. We'll take one call. Okay, I just put the number on the screen. Let's see how this works. I have no idea. We'll give it a few seconds here. How you doing, Emma? Oh, you know what? I don't actually have your sound on. Man, this has been a nightmare. Okay, so we have one call. Let's go ahead and... Okay, hello. You are on air with Emma, Georgie, and Danny. What's up? Hey, James. Hey, thank you for your help. I sincerely appreciate it.
Yeah, sure, man. Well, I'm having a whiskey right now with a squirt of Estrogen in it, so thanks, Georgie. My question is, based on the biological, the central dogma of biology, basically the over-reductionism of genomics and stuff like that, what's your favorite evidence that the same thing's not going on with molecules like estrogen, progesterone, and stuff like that, where...
Hey, James, I'm so sorry. Hey, James,
yeah.
it looks like I was muting you at some point. So go ahead and can you restart your question?
Yeah, to Georgie. What is your favorite evidence that the biological state, the physiological state, is not reduced, could be reduced to, molecules like estrogen and progesterone, just like we were over-reducing things in the genomics paradigm? How do we know that we're not, over-generalizing a physiological state to a single molecule like estrogen, with correlative effects?
There's a lot of evidence. So first of all, I'm sure you know about the Human Genome Project, right? We talked about this with Danny on one of the first podcasts. And even like I know the people who, some of the very high-ranking officials on that project, because they work at NIH, which is not far from where I live, and some of them are actually not close, but they're friends. And in their words, basically, they don't expect anything to come out of it. They had high hopes about 10 years ago. My other evidence is that for a number of different diseases that were claimed to have a heavily genetic component, basically the evidence so far has not shown up. And I posted some studies about depression was one of them.
I think sorry to cut you off. I think I didn't phrase my question right the second time around. I'm saying that the Human Genome Project is hilariously wrong.
Right.
And we know that they produce, they appropriated causality where there was none. So how do we know we're not doing that with molecules like estrogen and progesterone, where perhaps they're just correlative?
I'll tell you how basically intervention trials is usually what tests, what can separate correlation from causality, right? And a number of recent trials have actually tried interventions that would lower estrogen and see what effects this has on specific health parameters. So I mentioned one of the studies about half an hour ago that given an aromatase inhibitor to women with intractable epilepsy completely reverses it. So these women can go home and lead normal lives, right? So this more or less unequivocally demonstrates that estrogen is intimately involved in seizures. The same thing is now being done with serotonin and things like cardiomyopathy, like basically congestive heart failure, pulmonary hypertension, pulmonary fibrosis, which is known to be lethal within 3 to 4 years. Pfizer is running clinical trials with a drug very similar to Lizaride. It's called Turgoride. And now they're showing that all of these things that they claim were heavily genetic in origin are fully reversible by blocking a single serotonin receptor, 2B. So we don't have the evidence for all of these things, but so far the intervention trials, which are designed to separate correlation from causality, to prove causality, so far we have decent pieces of evidence that these biomarkers of stress or of ill health are actually direct causes, as much as they are probably a result of poor health as well. So it's not as simple of them being the original cause. As soon as they become the cause, they also become an effect as well. It's similar to the Warburg effect, which is probably another piece of evidence. I think you've seen the thread that I posted on Reddit, the discussion where basically people said, oh, we've been calling this the Warburg effect for over 100 years. Well, guess what? Now it looks like it's actually as much a cause of cancer as it is also an effect. So the fact that the genome theory hasn't produced much, combined with these recent studies showing that many of the things we consider as biomarkers of stress are also causes of stress as well, or at the very least amplify it, gives me not hope, but gives me confidence that we are on the right track. Biochemistry is an open science. Like anything, it's an open system. It's infinite, and knowledge will always accumulate. So we'll probably discover things that are even more fundamental. But at this stage, these are the things that we know, and these are the things that we can manipulate. So that's what I will do for now. If the evidence changes tomorrow, of course, I'll consider it, right? So I wouldn't necessarily make a statement that, yes, we discovered that estrogen is bad, and that would be in excess, and that would be the last we'll ever discover about it. No, we'll probably discover something else later on, basically at the quantum level, which is Ray spoke about recently in regards to smell. Maybe there is a more fundamental reality, which science will probably discover at some point, that's driving the excess of estrogen, and probably even the very manifestation of stress through the brain, which I think is where it's all coming from, right? So ultimately, when we understand the brain and how it interacts with the world, I think that would be a more fundamental theory that will supplant, that will replace the current biomarkers that we know about, which is cortisol and estrogen. But even those higher level biomarkers, even those appear to be actionable at this point, namely the aromatase inhibitors for epilepsy, blocking serotonin for cardiac and pulmonary fibrosis, the recent trials with serotonin antagonists for Alzheimer's disease, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have evidence that we're on the right track. Will this be the last word in health? No, absolutely not. But that's where I stand right now, based on the evidence.
Cool, thanks. That makes sense. And it sounds like the quantum level effects that you're talking about relate to how glycerol, for example, is so similar to the serotonin molecule, but has such different effects in LSD and stuff like that.
Exactly. Have you maybe read any of what was his name? Turin work, the Italian guy who works on smell and how molecules that are very similar. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So my suspicion is that the brain basically forms an entangled system with certain aspects of its environment, and depending on the quality of those aspects of the environment, that's how the brain responds. So it's almost like, if you're in the same room with a sick person, which at this point has been shown that many nurses that work in cancer wards and even like chronic kidney disease wards, people that have dialysis, these nurses have an abnormally high chance of getting the exact same disease as the patients they're working with. So I think that kind of shows you that the brain is essentially the original the original source of the disease. I know Aristotle said all disease starts in the gut, but it's the brain that controls the gut, and a little bit of vice versa. So the more we understand consciousness, the more fundamental aspects of disease we're going to find out.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Great question. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I think if I understood him, what his question was, I think, couldn't you just identify, we're not going to take any more callers, but I think, couldn't you identify what, like the if something was good or bad simply by the way that it affected the redox balance? And wouldn't serotonin and estrogen, those always shift the redox balance towards reduction? And that would be just a kind of a conclusive way to know whether they should be sought after or minimized?
The question was, how do we know that, I guess, being in an oxidized state is good, right? It's just a hypothesis, right?
True.
And my response is that, yes, we don't know for sure, but that's what the intervention trials are for, right? You identify a biomarker. Let's say a previous study found a correlation, just as this one. Study found a correlation between estrogen and autism, right? So the next step is, you do a trial where you actually, well, I don't know if it would be ethical, but inhibiting estrogen would be ethical. I don't think they will dare to give estrogen to a pregnant woman because they know very well this would cause abortion. So I guess we'll only be able to test half of the theory, which is, okay, if estrogen, let's see if estrogen is a cause of autism. Block estrogen synthesis directly, or block estrogen at the receptor, or maybe do both, and then see what happens with the offspring. Do they have lower rates of autism? If the answer is yes, well, then there is a piece of evidence that at least when it comes to neurological development in the womb, that estrogen is probably not beneficial, right? The pharma industry would counter by saying, oh, you never tested the other aspect. What if like very low microdosing estrogen, or giving pulse doses like at a very short intervals, maybe that would come back as beneficial? Well, it's something that it's very convenient because they know this is something that will never be tested ethically, be able to test in a Western country, because that test would involve an abnormally high risk of the woman terminating basically getting a spontaneous abortion. So unfortunately for us, it's very hard to prove completely that in an ethical way that estrogen is a harmful hormone for pregnant women and the fetuses. We can only test one aspect of it, that lowering it is actually beneficial.
With that, we'll give Emma the final word.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely hanging out with you two guys.
Seriously, Emma, thank you so much. Let me just make sure you guys aren't muted. Georgie, thank you so much. This has been the most error-filled live stream so far. So my extreme apologies. I hope this is even listenable, on YouTube. That would be really heartbreaking if it wasn't. But Emma, thank you so much. Such a good friend, and I always enjoy catching up with you. So thank you. And then Georgie, thank you as always for making these shows just what they are. So any final words from you?
Just keep fun up and stress down, as we said, as much as possible. And I think always having an awareness that if you eat commercial food, somebody out there is basically, probably more than one person, is being paid to make you eat junk that is produced at the lowest cost possible and sold at the highest price possible. So try to be as much in control of your food as you can without becoming orthorexic. And if it stops being fun, then you've done too much. Basically, you need to pay less attention than to what you're eating.
DC.com, Georgi Dinkov, thank you so much. Emma Sgourakis, thenutritioncoach.com.au. Thank you guys so much. Steph, you're amazing. Thank you. I'll have these errors fixed for the next time. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy this killer music.
Thanks.